So I think in the next 10 years, you're going to see a lot more outsourcing of office jobs, less to zero physical offices, an increase in the gig economy, and less knowledge positions internally within companies. So I'm going to frame all of these as why they work for businesses to save tons of money while getting more output, and also why it's so much easier to do it now than maybe it was 5 years ago. So with more outsourcing of office jobs, I think that this is fairly obvious given the fact that there's such an increase in globalization, which specifically for office jobs is being sped up by internet access at speeds that actually work being sort of commoditized around the globe. And what this means also is that a virtual assistant from, like Japan or the Philippines or India or China or even in Africa actually has access to fast enough internet to function working as if they're just a remote employee in the United States. They're now able to do it from home because the internet has been commoditized and they don't have to work for the third-party company that then hires a ton of people, has them all go into one building, and then they make a middleman margin off of having them then outsourced to the United States or other countries. I think especially from an affordability standpoint, this will be, now that it's been commoditized and individuals don't have to use third-party companies in the United States to hire people across the globe, that you're going to see more entrepreneurs and even, I would say, like higher tier salespeople that would have assistants help them hire a virtual assistant rather than someone at home in the office. So instead of spending $50,000 to $75,000 a year for help, you can spend $5,000 to $6,000 a year for help. And a lot of times that help will outperform the help that you would have got hiring someone in the United States anyway. The second thing is that there's going to be far less physical offices in United States companies and far more work from home. Now, this probably seems like a little bit obvious just based upon like the trends we've seen since COVID, but just going from my own experience from just having an office and then we went fully remote with everything, the remote work was for us far better than the office. Now, I think in some places the office is necessary. Like if people are physically coming to work with the staff in some way, like if you have like an ice cream shop or something. But for most jobs that are less collaborative, from a business owner standpoint, it makes a lot more sense to have remote workers in this case. Offices have a ton of hidden costs that are kind of not thought about. When we had our office, we were wasting a ton of money on just like office furniture, just supplies like pens, paper towels, water. It just felt like we were spending almost like $8,000 a month on an office of 24 people. And that just felt like crazy out of hand. Like it was money that didn't need to be spent. Also, you actually have to pay for the entire office anyway, and you got to pay for Wi-Fi for the office, and there's a whole slew of costs that come with it. Like we did it out of necessity. We were just like, we have to cut as much cost as possible. So we cut the office, everyone worked from home instead, and like cut all the costs. And when you finally rip off that bandaid, it is so much better. You will save so much more money. We went through it. It was like a month of kind of a difficult transition, but afterwards saving probably another $30,000 a month. I think especially in times like these right now, it's really good to try to cut as much cost as possible because the whole point of a business is to use the least amount of resources possible to create the largest amount of output while producing a profit for the company. In doing this, having an office, a lot of times when you're going through, like we did, when we went through the business process, it felt like, oh, the office is the next like natural step to starting a business. And then you get it, it's a waste of money, you get rid of it, you didn't need it in the first place essentially. And I think it's just one of those things, it's hard to mentally challenge yourself to be like, do I actually need these things? Or is this me thinking this is the next business entity step of going to having my company and being able to tell people I have an office? It is just far less expensive to not have an office, and unless you really need it, I would try to get rid of it if you could. The last thing is too, you don't really need to deal with gossip and stuff within the office as well, which just creates problems between individuals. Now this is obviously culture to culture. We had an issue with gossip for sure at my company when we had the office on and off. There's times there's a problem, times where it's not, but from a business owner standpoint, not having those relationships is a little bit easier for fellow employees to not be criticizing one another because they're not doing as much work. But on that note, when they get rid of all of these offices, you're going to see a way higher emphasis on certain skills like revenue generation. Is this a person who can come in and cut a ton of cost and systemize things better? Or just a genuine problem solver CEO types? Another thing is that the gig economy will grow. Now, I know that this is like a pretty popular opinion as well, but I have a different thought process of why it's going to grow. Business owners are way more incentivized to hire people through the gig economy rather than hiring them themselves. So this kind of touches on like even the other 2 points where it is way easier to hire a contractor to do something than it is an employee. Now that's like kind of tough to distinguish the differences sometimes, and as a business you got to establish that very clearly, like legally, so that you're not just paying your employees as like 1099 when they're really just functioning as an employee. But with respect to the gig economy, this is just a way for companies to lower their liability and not have to pay employer taxes. For instance, if in trucking, if we hire an owner-operator to do something, that owner-operator almost certainly does not have workers' compensation, and they're not paying employer taxes because they're the owner of the company. So between these two, like in Delaware, you would save 14% on employer taxes plus workers' comp. And then let's say like New York, New Jersey, you might be saving like 22 to 27% total because the workers' comp there is so much higher. Also, a lot of employees like of companies, like I used to actually drive for Lyft and Uber, and a lot of people like in this community do not pay their taxes. A lot of times they get away with it because most people are not audited. So a lot of times people are kind of like unjustly more incentivized to do 1099 jobs just so they don't have to pay the tax and just keep all that money in their pocket. There's a lot of sales going on with the gig economy as well. It's just like, oh, like you're your own boss, when in my opinion, no one's their own boss. Who's ever in charge of the income coming to you, they're your boss. But I think it's being sold to people as if they're their own boss. And again, like I was talking about before, there's far less liability firing a contractor or someone working a gig than it is to fire an employee. So this is just another thing that is incentivizing companies to not hire employees in the United States. The last thing, and I'm a little bit less sure about this, is less knowledge positions within companies. So like less legal, accounting, HR professions, like hiring a person to do this within a company. Because, for me personally, there's a lot of times where if I have an expert question now, I can just use Google Bard or ChatGPT to actually get a good answer and then maybe back it up with some other things. Now, how well that will be executed, I'm sure there'll be a lot of innovation in the next couple of years here, but it's kind of interesting that the lack of value that knowledge has now because it's so readily summoned by these different programs that exist now. So that's what I think is going to happen. I'm almost using this as like a journal entry maybe to look back to see if any of this was actually accurate, but just in terms of a lot of these things are obvious. So if you actually logically look through from a business perspective, all these things make sense to execute on immediately, especially in tougher times right now. It's like way better to cut costs and get a little bit leaner. I think we were a little bit frothy for the last couple of years. I know we were. So this is just what I think is going to happen. This is stuff that I think is working. And these are the operating principles that we're taking our company on in the future upon lots of thinking and research and execution. So just my 2 cents. Thanks for listening. And if you disagree with anything, let me know, and like and subscribe and leave a comment. And thank you.